receive this time as a gift. Like, you're not always going to be in that position that you're in. I wasn't always going to be the singles pastor. And sometimes when it's right in front of you, you're thinking, man, I got this gear I want to hit. I want to get to this place. And you're always thinking about the future when God is giving you a gift right now.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Higher Purpose, a Vanderbloemen podcast. I'm your host, Brett Connolly, and joining me as she does every week, every episode, my co-host, my co-worker, my co-friend, Sarah Gonzalez in the house.
We're back.
We got to figure out
I
another.
know, we need a new saying.
Yeah, we need.
It's kind of getting embarrassing.
I'm not even going to say we're so back.
Okay,
but
we are.
But we just said it. We'll work on it. Offline.
We'll get something else. Don't worry, guys.
What's the opposite of we're so back? Like, we're so done. At least we're not that.
We're not done.
At least we're not
We're excited to be here.
and I'm really looking forward to this episode.
Yeah.
Because we have a special guest with us today. He is in the Houston area. I'm not sure. I want to hear like kind of a clarification on this because he was in the DFW area. Now he's in the Houston area the last few years. Hopefully he's an Astros fan. Hopefully he's a Texans fan. I don't know. I love him either way. But our guest today is Jarrett Stephens, the senior pastor at Champion Forest. Jarrett, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Grateful to be with you, Brett and Sarah. Thanks for having me on. I love Vanderbloemen and just what y'all do for not just churches, but businesses in the sense of placing people. I tell William all the time, anytime he's in my area, I owe him lunch because he is the one that helped place me here at Champion Forest, and could not be more grateful for that phone call he made to me a few years ago telling me about this opportunity. So great friendship with you and just the people at Vanderbloemen. Really grateful for y'all.
That's awesome.
And who is your football team of choice? I feel like the people need to know.
Oh, bro,
this.
Look, when I left Dallas in the rearview mirror. I'm all in on Houston. So I am a Stros, Texans, Rockets fan. I got more Stros gear and Texans gear than I ever, and Rockets gear for that matter, than I ever had of the Mavericks.
Wow.
What's the Cowboys? Is that the team that's in Dallas?
Yeah, what's their name?
What's the name? Yeah. Rangers, all that. I'm telling you, I'm all in on H-Town, man.
I love it. Fully submerged.
And if I remember, wasn't like, it was either when you came as a candidate or your first Sunday, the committee, didn't they have like a goodie bag for you with like Houston sports swag?
I felt like I was getting drafted, man. I put my Houston Texans hat on. A matter of fact, I've got a picture on my way back to Dallas, in my Houston hat, just kind of pointing to it. And it's in my office here. I keep it just as a, memory. And absolutely, man, I got drafted. So I was pumped.
That's awesome.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, we're so glad to have you on the podcast here today. Obviously, as people are listening to this, they're probably in that 20s, early 30s space of maybe they're wrestling with what their calling is. Maybe it's ministry, maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe it's something completely different, but they're serving in a local church. Or maybe they're in their first full-time position and going, is this my long-term fit? And man, I would love to just kind of kick it back to you of just your story of starting as an intern, and continuing to serve and eventually being the teaching pastor at Prestonwood. So I just want to kind of kick it back to you for a few minutes just to hear, man, how did you get plugged in for that internship and what did that look like? How did the Lord use that as you changed positions through the years?
Yeah, well, I've wanted to be a senior pastor since I was 17 years old.
Wow.
That's the only thing. Yeah, I tell people I wanted to play college football and coach high school football. And I tell people I would have played college football if any coach would have asked me to, but nobody did, okay? And so that tells you how good I was. And so when God turned my heart toward ministry as a senior in high school, I never looked back. And that's what I've always known that I wanted to do. And growing up in a small church, I was very aware that like the average pastor stayed somewhere like 5 to 7 years. And just in the back of my head, even as a teenager, I remember thinking, I don't want to do that, man. I want to plant my life somewhere. And I don't know where that desire came from, but I assume just the Lord put it there. And so when I was graduating Washita Baptist University in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, I had an opportunity. My best friend's dad at the time was on staff at Prestonwood. And he called me and said, hey, we've got some internships open. And I had followed Prestonwood. I'm what you call, Brett and Sarah, I'm what you call a church rat. Okay. You got gym rats that never leave the gym. I am a church rat. Like, I love the church, everything about it. I love meetings. I love working with committee teams. I love the preaching. I love mission. I love everything about the church.
That's awesome.
And so I had followed Prestonwood. And man, I grew up in small town Louisiana, Bossier City, so kind of Shreveport, Bossier, if you're familiar with that area. And and then went to Washita, okay, which the town of Arkadelphia had 20,000 people in it. That was the population. I remember seeing the sign. Well, when I got to Prestonwood, they had more than 20,000 members. Okay,
Yep.
So like, I'm thinking this church is going to chew me up and spit me out. But I had a couple things going for me. One is I'd followed the church and thought, man, I really sense God's in this. I'm going to go be this intern. But I also had a mom and dad that taught me work ethic. We were a blue collar, middle class family. My dad was a brick mason. My mom was an RN. And so I like, look, man, I grew up in Louisiana. I went to school in Arkansas. My family's from Mississippi, okay? So that means I'm never the smartest person in the room, ever, okay? Not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But I thought, nobody's going to outwork me. And so I went to Prestonwood, and that was my posture, man. I'm going to outwork everybody here. And again, just loving the church and wanting to absorb everything going on and learn. And so I became an intern there. And I was a 22-year-old single intern out of college working with married adults. And, I was like, what am I doing? I have no idea. But the families of the married adult ministry really brought me in, and I kind of became a big brother to their kids and an older son to them. And man, it wasn't 6 months in. I was teaching a Sunday school, if you will, a life group, Bible fellowship, whatever you want to call it, on Saturday nights. We had Saturday night church. And I was teaching this in young singles just as kind of a volunteer opportunity, not as part of my job. And God just was blessing it, man. The young singles started growing at the same time. The young singles pastor went down to Austin. He left and went to another church. Our college pastor at the time went and started doing high school ministry. And so it left that 18 to 25 year age gap looking for a person to fill it. And they came to me and said, would you be willing to? And I was like, heck yeah. So about 6 months into my internship, I became an associate, worked with 18 to 25-year-olds. Long story short, about 6 months after that, the singles pastor left and planted a church. And so here I am, 22 years old, 23 years old, and they gave me the entire ministry. So I'm now over 18 to like 35-year-olds. I'm 22, 23, single, know nothing. And looking back, it was crazy that they gave it to me. But man, I had 10 wonderful years as the young singles pastor, college pastor, and then went into the teaching role, did that for 10 years. And so served a great church, 20 years at Prestonwood beside Dr. Graham. And that's when the door opened here at Champion Forest. William called me and, looking back, almost 4 years now. It's been great.
Wow. That's amazing. I love hearing just the different things of walking in obedience and then seeing the Lord take you. Because if you would have said, hey, at 23, you're going to take over and be in charge of all these single people, and you're also going to be single, and these married people, and you're still going to be single, and all those things. Tell me what it looked like at that age to kind of, in that obedience, that door opened. You didn't necessarily have to step into it. What did it look like to say yes in that season of obedience of the Lord was opening that door? You loved this church. You loved the church. What did that look like to kind of step into that calling?
Well, your phrase opening the door is really true. And it's been true for me my entire ministry. I've never had to push anything open. God has always opened opened the door from getting the internship.
Wow.
My buddy's dad calling me and saying, we've got an opportunity. It was an
Right.
open door. So I
Right.
walked through it. They come to me, you want to be the young singles and college pastor? It was an open door. That's not something that I was signing up for or applying for. Same with the teaching pastor position. There was one time like I said, I've known I wanted to senior pastor since I was 17, 18 years old. I spent one summer as a summer intern in my home church in the youth ministry. And I knew that's when I didn't want to do student ministry. So it's been senior pastor or bust for a long, long time. And here's the thing, I had an opportunity about 10 years in to go be a senior pastor. And I was thinking, God, are you in this? And I know a lot of people watching this podcast, listening to it, they may be at a fork in the road, and it may appear that a door's opening.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a senior pastor. I've been young singles pastor for 10 years. And so I'm thinking, man, this may be my opportunity. This may be it. And so I listened to the opportunity. I go and visit with the search committee. I go to the church, and I can remember I was thinking about, God, are you in this? And everything seemed to be going that way. And I can take you to the neighborhood. I can take you by the house that I was running by. I was running one evening.
Wow.
And I was just praying through this decision because it was here. I was either going to have to say yes and go all in, or I was going to have to say no.
Right.
And I remember running and praying. And I remember the Lord saying, speaking into my heart, Jarrett, what's it going to take more faith to do? And I remember sitting there going, well, I mean, I've never been a senior pastor, so it's going to take faith to do that. And I began outlining this in the decision tree, if you will. And then I think, well, it's also going to take more faith for me to continue being the singles pastor here. It doesn't look like there's any doors opening at Prestonwood for any advancement. I mean, I'm kind of as high as I'm going to get to go. And so I asked myself, what's going to take more faith to do? Because I know God speaks the language of faith. And at that moment, it was like, what's going to take more faith to do? It's going to take more faith for me to take a back seat. I was officing in a storage closet, and
Wow.
I was going to, take a back seat, not go be a senior pastor, but continue being the singles pastor. And when I made that decision, I'm telling you, it wasn't 2 weeks later. You can kind of see, if you're watching this on video, these are my journals right up here. And I could probably pull it off from the year that I was walking through. It represents 20 years of my life.
Wow.
And I can remember making that decision. It wasn't 2 weeks later that the teaching pastor at Prestonwood left to go to another church. I had no idea he was leaving. And Pastor Graham came to me and said, man, I've had my eye on you. Are you ready to be the teaching pastor?
Wow.
And it started there. Now, the same thing going to Champion Forest. Champion. I've been at Prestonwood for 20 years. I mean, I didn't think I was going to leave. This is my home. This is where I met my wife. This is where we were raising our children. I had a very comfortable life, lived in a dream. I was getting to preach every single week and lead at a great church. And the same question, what's it going to take more faith to do? And at that time, the answer was, it's going to take more faith for me to go than to stay. And so I just say that, I know we're a lot of 20, 30-year-olds listening, and maybe you kind of feel like you're in a dead end, or should I take this job, or should I just stay right here? That's kind of a question that I always tell people to kind of be a filtering for. Like, what's it going to take more faith to do? Because it could take more faith to go. It could take more faith to stay.
Right.
And I just know God honors faith. And in my life, the way that I've answered that question at two critical junctures, man, has been formative for me and set me on a trajectory as far as my future goes, in a plan that I could never see for myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, I think that's a really good filter for people to kind of apply as they're wrestling with, should I stay or should I go? Because so many times I'm interviewing with candidates, and maybe they're in this kind of age pool, maybe they're even older, and it's kind of just a running from something, but it's just like, hey, what's that faith piece? How's the Lord using this? And where you're currently at, and there's talk to me about like the residency program that you have at the church, and why that's so important to you.
Yeah. Well, let me just follow up with what you said, just as far as staying or going. One is, I tell people that God teaches you more in the waiting times of life than any other time. You look at the scriptures, wait on the Lord, wait on the Lord, wait on the Lord. It doesn't mean just sit there and do nothing. It's kind of an anticipation. You're getting yourself ready. And as God is preparing you for whatever that next step is, you may be forced to wait a long time for whatever it is. I mean, again, listen, I know I've been called a senior pastor since I was 17, 18 years old. I didn't get to be a senior pastor until I was 45 or 42 when I came to Champion Forest. So my point is, there are things that God does in the waiting times of your life that he can do any other way. And he cares way more about our hearts and our character than he does our position, our title, or where we serve him. And so I would just encourage those listening that if they're in a waiting season, I tell people, don't waste your wait. Okay. You work, keep your head down, do the best job that you can, honor your authority. God knows your name. He knows your cell phone. He knows your email, and he will get a hold of you and move you at his pleasing. And so you just keep trusting him and walking with him. As it relates to the residency program, man, I'm a product of a residency program. I started off at Prestonwood as an intern. I did my doctoral dissertation on developing an intern program and how to make it strategic and holistically develop a young pastor. So I knew early on at Champion Forest, I was running the intern program at Prestonwood, and I saw early on with our multi-site approach, we didn't have a deep bench. And we had to develop a minor league system, if you will. And the best way to do that is a residency program. And so we started that residency program with the blessing of the church. We named it in honor of our longtime serving pastor, 28 years here, Damon Shook. We call it the Damon Shook Residency Program. And we wanted to raise up young people in the spirit of Damon Shook who had a heart for evangelism and missions plugged into the local church. And so that's what we did. We opened it up. We have currently over 20 residents that come on our team. They report to a supervising minister in their area of expertise. It can be children's ministry, student ministry, missions ministry, pastoral ministry, communications, worship, whatever it may be. They report to a supervising minister. We have monthly cohort sections where we get them together and we do trainings, and we try to just develop them holistically. We put books in their hand, help build their library, allow them to ask the why questions. You know, a lot of times when you come into residency, you just put them to work, but they're never explained, this is why we do what we do. And so we allow settings for that. And so it's just a good opportunity, you know, for someone to come in to work hard, and we tell them, you give us a year, we pay them well. And they're learning in an environment where there's a safety net there. And at the end of their year, we can either re-up them for another year. We can launch them out if they're ready to go. We can raise them up in our organization. But for 1 year, they have to be on our team. And it's a great program. I would encourage anybody that is interested in it to go online and check it out. Again, as part of my dissertation, I was looking at every resident program in the country and just taking the best of every program and trying to put it together. And I think with what we have right now, I don't know, I'm biased, obviously, but I don't know of another residency program in the country that has what we have and offers what we offer here at Champion Forest.
That's cool. And you have the cottages, right? Is that a done project? Is it up and running?
Yeah, that's done. So cool. That's done. So you know, we have a great leader in our church, a guy by the name of Mark Lanier, a very successful lawyer, probably the United States. You know, they call him the Michael Jordan of trial attorneys. I mean, he is the greatest trial attorney in the United States. And he loves the Lord. He teaches a Sunday school class here of about 700 people. And he's got his undergrad in Greek and Hebrew. Yeah, he's unbelievable. And God's blessed him, and he wants to leverage his resources and influence for the kingdom. And so he has the world's largest personal theological library on his campus, on his land here in Houston, about 10 minutes from the church. And his wife was on the search committee that helped bring me here. And so we have an incredible friendship, and really our hearts are united for the kingdom. And so he heard, the vision for the residency program, and he's got a kingdom vision, and said, what if I build him some residences, some cottages, like out of, he loves England and the Cotswolds. And so in the spirit of that, he built these residencies, cottages for them to live. And they've got access to the library because our residents have to be working on their master's in seminary. So they're working on their master's in seminary, getting their theological education. They are on our team getting their practical work experience, and then they live together in community. And again, holistically, I mean, it's just a beautiful thing.
And you had mentioned there's about 20. Is that what you said? That
23, but who's counting, Brett?
Who's counting? So you have 23 residents at for a year, I'd be willing to bet that there aren't 23 people that are applying for it. If you would,
You're right.
if you would tell us a little bit, as I'm thinking about a listener,
Yeah.
as they're trying to say, hey,
Yeah.
what can I do better? How can I position myself? Was there something that you've seen, even as you're pastoring 18 to 35-year-olds early on? You're clearly passionate about this space of equipping the next generation. What's like one or two things that you say, hey, these are the things that kind of separate the yeses from the like not right nows, keep working, maybe circle back in a year. What separates those?
Great question. I'm gonna say, first of all, work ethic. Like when I did my doctoral dissertation, I interviewed all of the former interns that were in the ministry, and I said, what is the greatest weakness of our intern program? And the interns said discipleship. Okay. I asked the supervising minister, what is the greatest strength of our intern program, residency program? And they answered discipleship. So the supervising ministers who had been in the game for a long time in ministry were saying the greatest strength is discipleship. And the interns were saying the greatest weakness is discipleship. And as I dug deep and looked at that, what was happening, Brett and Sarah, was that it was the definition. Those coming in out of college were defining discipleship as sitting in a Starbucks, talking about, what God's teaching them and, doing a Bible study together. The supervising ministers who have been in ministry for a long time were saying discipleship is, man, me taking you to the hospital and you seeing it, and me throwing you to the wolves and letting you teach this Bible study over here when you're not even ready. And they were misdefining discipleship. So I had to talk to the interns and say, look, discipleship is not just sitting and holding hands and singing Kumbaya. And to the supervisors, I had to say, look, discipleship is not just take them to the hospital, but on the way to the hospital, talking about a baseball game last night, you need to ask them deeper level questions about life and what's going on in their heart. And so I had to redefine discipleship for them. So as I talk to residents, one of the things that you ask what separates them is this whole idea of what expectations of what ministry is.
Right.
And those that come in with a bias toward action, like we're going to work, man, that separates people a lot. And so I like to look for people who played on athletic teams because they know what it's like to be a team player and they know what it's like to work because they had to work to win. I like to see, talk to people who, have military background because they understand the sense of duty and authority, and all those things play in to a mindset that will make for a great resident. So I would say number one thing that sets them apart, if I can, talk to them and spend enough time with them, would be just a sense of work ethic, a get it done attitude. And then probably another thing would simply be just a teachable spirit, a humility, somebody that's not coming in like, you owe me a thank you note for me working here. But instead somebody that's teachable, humble, understands they don't have all the answers. And that's why they need this residency. Those two things right there, humility and work ethic, I think, set people apart.
Yeah. I love that. I want to kind of pivot a little bit, still in the same thread, but you are involved in a lot of things, invested in a lot of things. You've done a lot of things over your ministry. Obviously, something that's of high importance to you is your family. You talked about your wife a little bit, and you've got 4 girls. And so I just want to hear, you are so invested in discipling those around you, invested in a lot of other people's lives. And then also you've got your family. How do you prioritize? I know work-life balance is a very a high intense subject that everybody's talking about right now, but I really do love to hear pastors' takes on it of what does that look like for you and your family? What does that look like for, the fact that you said yes to this calling on your life and that the Lord's opened these doors for you? And what does that look like to partner with your family in your ministry and also keep them a priority?
Yeah, great question. And I'm blessed by my family. They are everything to me. And, I'm so I guess the way I could articulate this is to say, I met my wife in ministry. Okay, so I was in ministry as the young singles pastor. She was in my ministry being a young single. Now, you weren't supposed to do that. You weren't supposed to date people in your ministry, okay?
Classic.
But I tell people the church wasn't paying me enough, and I was going to get something out of the deal, okay? So I met my wife, and Debbie is unbelievable. And I say that the beauty of that, and I'm a little, like I said, I might be different, but she doesn't know any different than ministry.
Yeah.
And so that has, like, from a pastor standpoint, like that's our life.
Yeah.
Ministry is not, it's not our identity. Okay. Hear me on that. I know my identity is in Christ. I know my security is in Christ. Ministry is not my identity, but it's more than just what I do. I mean, it is a part of who we are as a married couple. It always has been.
Right.
And so there's never been this, family over here, ministry over here. It's always been this. And I'm with you on the work-life balance. Blessed are the balance, right? I mean, an athletic stance, if you're taking an athletic position, it's all about balance. We're in the Olympics as we're recording this conversation, man. You're watching those gymnasts. It's all about balance. Balance is great, and we need to be balanced. But like I said, for me, ministry is a part of our life. I look at it as more of a spoke of a will. I don't look like God first, family second, kids third, or, work fourth. I look at it as a spoke of the will. My relationship with the Lord is the middle part. And then everything comes off of my relationship with the Lord. And so, I try to, Debbie and I are really good. Any great marriage you got to be able to communicate and resolve conflict. We get together once a month and we do a calendar together. So she knows, okay, here's what's going on at the church. I know what's going on with the family. She's the CEO of the family. And so we're communicating and coordinating. And, family's my first ministry. I mean, no doubt about it. They're always going to get the priority. And as you mentioned, I got 4 girls. I'm the president of my own sorority house. All right? Wouldn't have it any other way. Love those girls. And our church is awesome. They know I'm not going to miss a girl's, I'm not going to miss my kids' activities. I'm going to be a part of their life. That's a priority to me.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to serve in a church that gets that, understands that, and wants that.
Right.
And to me, it's just never been a competition. We do it together. And we're very open about it. And I'm blessed in that regard, again, because we met in ministry and that's all we know.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you share the practical side too, though, of like you have a monthly meeting, you sit down, you look at the calendar, because that really is a part of the balance. All day long we can say, oh, well, you just, we're good at communicating. Okay, but how do you communicate?
But practically,
yeah. We sit down, we look at the calendar, like we have to talk about it. We've got all these activities.
I learned early on my wife doesn't like surprises a lot, right? And so if I can get it on the calendar and here's what's going on, she can look at it, and she can also, and this is helpful for pastors too, because I can go, hey, I'm traveling here, 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 here. And I look at, when I say yes to these things, I'm not thinking about them compounding.
Right.
And then I look at it and go, oh man, okay, I need to pull back on this or say no to this.
Right.
And Debbie gets say in all of my outside speaking engagements as well. Hey, I've got this. We're looking at it together. We make these decisions together. And there's some things where I go, no, I really sense I need to be at this. This is an important deal. And she's great, or it might be too much. And we're like, hey, we need to take that off. I need to be here for that. So communication and getting that's a huge deal for our family.
I love it.
And one thing that we ask everybody that joins this podcast, it's kind of our like follow-up landing the plane question, is obviously like there's lessons learned, there's tools added to your tool belt in ministry, there's things that you feel better equipped for now than you did when you were starting off, and the question simply, what do you know now that you wish you would have known back then? Is there 1 or 2 things you go, man, I had to like trip up, skin up my knee, but I made sure I wouldn't do that again? What's kind of that 1 or 2 lesson learned that you wish you would have known?
That's a great question. I think, being in the position that I am now as the lead pastor, I kind of knew this when I was the singles pastor, and I'm putting myself in 20s and 30s, since that's kind of our target audience. And they're not at the top of the food chain, so to speak. I would just tell that person to receive this time as a gift. Like, you're not always going to be in that position that you're in. I wasn't always going to be the singles pastor. And sometimes when it's right in front of you, you're thinking, man, I got this gear I want to hit. And I want to get to this place. And you're always thinking about the future when God is giving you a gift right now that, you know what? The weight of the organization doesn't fall on your shoulders. You don't have to be privy to all of these meetings where these consequential decisions are being had.
Right.
That's not a bad thing. This time in your life is a season. And so if I could probably go back, I'd probably tell young Jarrett, man, enjoy that season more because you're going to be pulled plenty of directions. You're going to be, I hear I am 46 years old, man, I'm, God willing, got the next 20 years to run and be a part of some, things at a high level. I wish I could go back probably and go, man, I want to enjoy this time of my life more, just resting in what I'm in.
Yeah. That's good. That's so good. And then kind of in the same vein as that, all of our listeners are possibly, like Brett was saying at the beginning, maybe thinking about ministry, or they are in ministry and maybe they're thinking of going into a nonprofit world or whatever that looks like. Maybe they have a Bible degree and they're not even sure. They tried it for a year and they're like, I think I want to serve at my church, but I want to work somewhere else. What does it look like to have that discernment in your life to figure out kind of where the Lord's calling you and what to step into? What's just a piece of advice that you would give some listeners that are in that tension right now?
Well, one, I would say, time alone with the Lord, that, listen, God will speak if you allow him to. So make sure you're spending time alone with the Lord in his word. I always like to remind young folks, Proverbs 3, your word is a lamp into my feet and a light into my path.
Yeah.
It's not a spotlight into the future. Okay. It's a lamp into your feet. And so every day as you walk with Jesus, he reveals more and more and more. And then I would just go back to that key phrase that we talked about earlier, and that is open doors. You go walk through open doors. When God opens doors for you to serve in your local church, get in there and serve. And you may, find out real quick, you know what? I like being in my secular job over here and funding kingdom work, and and it being a servant opportunity as opposed to being on staff and having to, that's not my calling. I'm more gifted over here. And so I would just say walk through, but then it could be that you're serving and volunteering and a position opens and they say, because of your service, hey, this is where would you be willing to do this? Or God burns a heart in you to say, man, I want to do this full time. But I would just say, pay attention to those open doors. Don't feel like you have to push anything. Yeah. If you're walking with Jesus, being led by the Spirit, I'll say it again, man, he's got your cell phone. He's got your email. I use my experience in getting to Champion Forest. I didn't put a resume out. Right. I didn't, make things. I didn't try to, I'm a type A guy, man. I know a lot of people. I'm pretty networked. I didn't want, I made a deal with the Lord with Champion Forest that I wasn't going to tell anybody about it. That my desire, my heart, as I knew it was open, anything like that, it came to me. And so when that door opened, you walk through it. So I would say that key phrase, open doors, Sarah, is really a key phrase on that.
That's good. That's good. Well, Jarrett, thank you so much. Thank you for coming and talking with us. And we appreciate your vulnerability to tell your story, tell us some practical things as well as kind of what the Lord's currently doing in and through you and at Champion Forest. And we're just grateful for it. I know our listeners can learn a lot from what you had to say. And so thank you for taking the time.
Hey, thanks for having me. Y'all keep up the great work you're doing, and really grateful to be kingdom partners with you.
Amen.
Appreciate it, Jarrett.
Us too. Thanks, Jarrett. Thank you so much for listening to A Higher Purpose, a Vanderbloemen podcast. If you want to listen to any of our other episodes, you can go to vanderbloemen.com/podcasts. You can also stream us anywhere that you find your podcasts, such as Amazon, as well as Spotify, and anywhere else that you download them. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.